All right. Great. Well, good morning, all. Thank you so much for joining today. We really appreciate everyone's time and expertise. So we'll go ahead and get started. Krista, could we go ahead and do a roll call?
Okay. Caroline Traub, Chair.
Here.
Nancy Bernard. Valerie Graber.
Here.
Tom Jensen has retired, but we haven't gotten an application from Angela Hopt, who is supposed to be replacing him. Mike Lubliner.
Here.
Jonathan Jones.
Here.
Chris McCarthy.
Here.
Mark Rabel. Andrea Smith.
Here.
Brandon Stock.
I'm here. Good morning.
Jeff Urich. So we do have a quorum.
Great. And would anyone from the public like to introduce themselves? Okay, so next up is to review and approve the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to amend or approve the agenda?
It
I'd
looks
like
good.
to-
Motion to approve.
I second it.
Great, all in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Okay, next up, we have an agenda. So looking at the meeting minutes from our last tag meeting, which was January 13th. So Krista has those up on the screen. Scroll through them. So would anyone like to make a motion to amend or approve the meeting minutes from January 13th?
Motion to approve minutes.
Thanks, Mike. There a second?
Second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Okay, so now on to the main event. Before we dive on in, just wanted to remind everybody about where we are in the process. So we, the mechanical tag, kicked off our efforts related to the 2021 code development cycle in December. We met 4 times in December and January to review existing state amendments as well as the significant changes to the 2021 model codes. And our tag is responsible for the mechanical code, the mechanical chapters of the residential code, and the fuel gas code. We currently have 10, maybe 9 members on our tag with a couple vacancies, specifically for the fire marshal, construction trades, and utility seats. So just as a reminder, anyone is still welcome to apply for those positions. So please reach out to Krista if you're interested, and she can guide anyone on that. So the proposal window was February 21st through April 8th. And I think we received a total of about 17 proposals for our tag to review. And so those were all posted with today's meeting materials. And there's a link to each individual proposal we'll be talking about. Most of those proposals are for the mechanical code. I think there's one for the fuel gas code and a couple for the residential code. So for the next several meetings, we'll be reviewing, discussing, and voting on whether or not to recommend these proposals as new or modified state amendments. So right now we have a meeting scheduled for today for next Thursday, May 19th at the same time, and then also for the following Thursday, May 26th at the same time. If we need more time than that, we can also add meetings in early June, but thinking 3 meetings will be adequate, but we'll see. After those tag meetings, our recommendations on each proposal will go to the MVE committee and then to the full council for consideration at the June meetings. And following the June meeting, staff will create the CR 102 with all of the recommended proposals. And then once that's available, there will be a public comment period for the public to comment on or to provide technical edits to these proposals. And depending on the content of those received comments, this tag may or may not reconvene to consider those before the MVE committee and the council votes on final adoption in the fall. And then just as a reminder, all these new 2021 codes will go into effect for permits submitted on or after July 1st, 2023. So I guess before we move on to the process, how we're going to consider each individual proposal, does anyone have any questions on kind of that high level process? Okay, excellent. So I think what I'm hoping to do here is first have the individual who submitted the proposal present the proposal and explain what it is, why it's needed and what impacts it will have. And once the proponent has shared that background, tag members or members of the public can ask questions of the proponent to get more clarity or to better understand the proposal. In general, members of the public are welcome to participate in all discussions. They're just not permitted to make or second motions or to vote. Please use the raise hand feature. I will call on you. Throughout the discussion, anyone can propose changes to wording of a proposal or to improve clarity or to change something about it. The proponent can accept or reject that amendment. If the proponent does not consider a suggested change a friendly amendment, the tag can vote on that amendment. If that amendment passes, the proposal will be updated. Once debate and discussion on an individual proposal is complete, I will be looking for a motion to recommend or reject the proposal as shown on the screen, which may be the original version or might be a slightly modified version depending on the discussion. So that motion will need a second and then we will vote. In general, we will do voice votes. So if at any time anyone wants a roll call vote, please feel free to request that. As the chair, I will not vote except in the case of a tie. If throughout the discussion, any questions arise that require a bit more research outside of this session, we can assign homework and someone will need to make a motion to table a proposal and then we will return to it next Thursday or the following Thursday. In general, now is really the time to ask all your questions of the proponent to ensure understanding, to propose modifications and edits to proposals, to minimize changes and edits later in the process. So any questions about kind of that process for how we're going to consider each proposal?
Yeah, Carolyn, I wanted to advise the committee that I have taken a new position. I will be working as a research scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And I've started that role, but I'm still in working with WSU for the next month. And I wanted to suggest if it's possible, because I have conflicts next week. I'm transitioning out of my voting member at the factory assembled structures with L&I, and the following week meeting that we've got scheduled, I'm fishing on vacation. So I was wondering if it's possible to look at some of the proposals that I had initiated to make sure that if possible and appropriate, they get ones that I work with Jonathan Jones on, that we get those addressed if possible today. I don't know if there's a prioritization for how we look at these. That was one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing is I am talking with Jonathan, who's taken over for me and is on this call, about whether he has the bandwidth to continue as supporting WSU's input on this committee. He's also on the energy tab. So I just wanted to share that with you. I don't think that I can be working on state building code council committee meetings in my new position with the National Lab. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think unfortunately, the agenda for today is set. And so the proposals we're going to talk about are the ones listed there on the screen. However, it does sound like, right, Jonathan is your alternate. And so hopefully he can attend the next two meetings and perhaps present and discuss those on your behalf, if that's possible.
That's fine. I have full confidence that Jonathan can articulate our controls. And I just wanted to thank everybody for working and putting up with me on this committee. So thanks. I'll be here.
Well, thank you for all your time and energy for sure. We appreciate it.
Right.
Great. Any other questions about process before we dive on in? All right. So as I mentioned, today we're going to limit discussion to those 8 proposals here in front of us on the agenda. It's essentially everything except for Chapter 4 of the IMC and related ventilation items in the IRC. So next week we'll cover those things as well as anything from today that needed more work. And then we'll have that third meeting to revisit any proposals from either today or next Thursday. So all that said, I think we are on to this first one. And Krista, this one was submitted by Austin, is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, Austin's not here. I can address this one for record.
Thank you, Eric. Take it away.
So section 306.6 is a Washington State addition to the code that I proposed a couple code cycles ago. At last code cycle, we added the words ready access instead of just access. And I think we need to review if we want the word ready or not. And and I'm not sure we have the, so I think for sure the first strike through of ready is required because the appliance that you're accessing is above a ceiling, and based on the definition of ready access, you have to be able to get to that without requiring the removal or movement of a panel. So the first ready for sure needs to come out. If the second ready is intended to talk about that the access panel itself has to have ready access and not the appliance, then maybe we need to keep the second ready, or that sentence needs to be reworked to be more clear about that the appliance has access, but the access panel has ready access. So I guess I would just turn it over to the tag to discuss that. And, as the proponent, we're willing to go back and modify the code language based on what the tag wants to do if we need to try to clarify this offline or do it online right now if we want to try to wordsmith that. So that's essentially the discussion between access and ready access, and make sure we have the proper term called out for the appliance versus the access panel. So.
Eric, I had a question in the context of what we're going to likely see with the requirement for heat recovery ventilators in some of these codes here in apartments, whether they're low rise or high rise. And in terms of the term access, and I don't know that it's going to come up or it's applicable to this change here, but my thought is that it really depends on who's responsible for the maintenance and the maintenance of that device. If it is an appliance that falls under this area 306. If it's the homeowner or the tenant that's required to maintain the filter, there's a different level of access possibly than if it is a building operator who is looking to maintain those filters or do even more maintenance on the system as removal of the core or other things that are beyond the expectations of the occupant. I was just wondering what you think about your thoughts on that as it might relate to the discussion of ready access versus just access.
Well, I guess could have a couple of thoughts, where where the ERV, HRV, yeah, that would be an appliance above a ceiling, in my opinion. If it's installed above a ceiling, you know, we're doing a lot of installations where we're installing them below ceilings and closets and other things. You know, in your 5/2 wood frame buildings, it gets pretty tricky in how those are installed, because the floor ceiling assembly is a permanent construction. The bottom membrane of that floor ceiling assembly, you know, is part of the permanent rated assembly. So, you know, that the code official would have to understand if the unit's being installed in a soffit below the rated floor ceiling assembly, or we are seeing some folks installing them within the rated floor ceiling assembly. And there are units that are made to essentially fit in the rated floor ceiling assembly. In that case, if it's within the rated floor ceiling assembly, you know, you would have to be able to remove that whole thing through a large rated access panel, essentially, based on the way this code is written, not just get access to replacing the filters. So yeah, there's lots of nuances to how the ERV, HRVs are being installed right now. And so yeah, does an apartment owner or a condo owner, apartment dweller, or, you know, do we need a higher level of access for them replacing a filter than the maintenance, the building maintenance people coming through to replace the filter? You know, it's similar, I guess, for like it'd be a similar type of maintenance to an air conditioning unit and replacing a filter if it's located above an assembly to an ERV. So I think in general we have, yeah, I don't know. So
Yeah,
you can't have ready access for something that's above a ceiling, because you got to be able to open the access panel to get to it. So we got to at least fix that much. So
thanks. Just one follow-up. I didn't expect you're going to untie that knot. That's it. We're going to see where that goes as we see more and more of these in. But I think it's important to consider. In ASHRAE 62.2, we've been talking about this issue as we look at multifamily and accessibility and who's responsible for different aspects of maintenance and operation of the equipment, to what extent the building owner is responsible for certain things like removal and other things that could be left in the occupant's realm. And it would be useful. We're looking at actually suggesting or requiring that in the submitted plan, it defines the role of how the maintenance gets done, who's to do it, and how they access it. Whether it's getting up on a ladder to clean the clogged intake filter from urban area particulates that have built up, or something as simple as this. So I'll let you go on that. I just thought I'd engage in that one because I think that's going to be a challenge for us in the future as we move towards more efficient, sustainable ventilation. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, Eric, it sounds like striking the first ready is kind of necessary. Curious if anybody has questions or thoughts on the second ready and whether that should be stricken or retained.
yeah, the question is, folks, do you read it as applying to the appliance, or read it as applying to the access panel, or do we need to rewrite the whole second sentence to be more clear?
I think it is kind of confusing, the second one. The first ready definitely needs to come out, because you couldn't even have it above a ceiling, a drop ceiling, because you'd have to remove a ceiling panel tile. But I didn't read the second one first the way you're saying it, access to the access panel. So that is confusing. I think that might need to be rewritten.
Okay, yeah, why don't I take that offline and try to rewrite the second sentence and then come back at the next meeting with better language for that one.
All right, Chris, I see your hands up. Question?
Yeah, it was just relating to the second sentence. I think to me, the confusing part is the first few words, appliances shall be provided with ready access to panel. I think the reference to appliances there is what makes it confusing in my mind. If it's referencing the appliance itself or if it's referencing the panel for the ready access.
Okay, yeah, let me try to take the second sentence offline and clarify it. I think so that the appliances have, I mean, we're trying to say that the appliances have to have a minimum size access panel is really what we're trying to say in that sentence second. And then I guess ready access to that access panel needs to be provided, you know. But I don't know if we need to say that, right? And we could say, so.
Yeah, I don't think you actually need to say that.
Okay, so I'll
Yeah.
reword the second sentence to guess maybe get rid of the word access somehow. Okay.
Great, thanks, Eric. Does anyone want to make a motion to table this one for now?
I make a motion to table the proposal.
Thank you, Valerie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Andrew. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. All right, we will circle back to this one next week with a revised second sentence. All right, so we are on to proposal 19 submitted by the City of Bellevue about transformer vault exhaust. So I think maybe Valerie, this one's you.
Yes, this was my attempt to link transformer exhaust to the IMC. The IMC doesn't mention transformer exhaust, and the only mention is the state amendment. So this is an amendment to the state amendment. And I thought it would be good to separate parking garage exhaust and transformer exhaust because they are two different things. Garage exhaust is environmental and transformer exhaust is its own thing. It has two different purposes. It is heat at one point and it's fire and explosion at another point. But so one thing I looked at was NEC. I linked it to NEC 450.45 because that's where all the requirements for transformer exhaust is located. And if you were a mechanical engineer or inspector, you wouldn't have that link to NEC to check or design it. Only the electrical engineer and inspector could do so. So I don't know if my thought was, I don't know if the whole state has adopted NEC. So I wanted to bring that up. I don't know if the whole state of Washington uses that electrical code. And then I separated it from garage exhaust. I did add an or in garage exhaust because that was kind of confusing. And I don't know, Eric, I'm glad you're here because you helped write that one. The 3 feet horizontally from 10 feet or 10 feet above joining grade for garage exhaust. And it read like, is it supposed to be 3 feet and 10 feet above the walking surface? Or was it 3 feet from or 10 feet from or 10 feet above? I had a hard time with the reading of the 3 feet. Do you remember that one, Eric? I think he's gone already.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Trying to get him off of mute.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 3 feet was added as part of the discussion at the last tag cycle. It was proposed, I think, by Grant Middleton. And the intent was, yeah, that you're horizontally 3 feet back from the sidewalk so that you're not, then you don't have to be 10 feet above.
So if you're 3 feet away from a sidewalk, you can be at grade with garage exhaust? Is that what you're saying?
Correct, that was the intent.
Okay, okay. So I added another or in there. to clarify that. So that does work. The or works with your intent. Now the separating of the transformer exhaust is to get some code language in the IMC that reflects transformer exhaust. And then I don't know if you want me to explain more about how a transformer is designed. An indoor vault has an exhaust that is shafted to the exterior with no dampers in it. And then there's makeup air with a fire damper on the inside of the building. So if the transformer explodes, the fire damper on the inside of the building shuts, theoretically, and then the flame will come out of the end of the exhaust pipe. So it works in two things. Transformer exhausts have this constant exhaust to keep them cool. Once they get to reach a certain temperature, the exhaust fan shuts down and it's in a dangerous mode. But I've gotten lots of questions on the requirements around transformer exhaust, and there isn't anything in the IMC other than the 10 feet. Everything is out of NEC.
So Valerie, your overall goal here is to make the requirement for transformer exhaust slightly more stringent by reducing the options in that third fragment of the sentence.
Not really more stringent. It's code. It's just not in the IMC. It's in NEC. It's not new code. It's just directing somebody to the proper code to design a transformer exhaust termination.
Right. I guess just previously for item 5, when the transformer vault exhaust was there, that exhaust could be 3 feet horizontally or 10 feet above or 10 feet below. And now it's the only option there is 10 feet above the walking surface.
Yes.
Okay.
Transformer exhaust should not be lower than 10 feet above a walking surface. It is to protect people from walking by it in case something happens. Under normal circumstance, it's only heat, but if something happens, then it's not just heat.
Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so I know there's been lots of discussions on this in the past. A couple of editorial comments, I guess, first. So do we need the comma on item 5? Do we need the comma before or should we remove that, I guess? I think it probably needs to be removed.
Okay.
And then I guess as far as the discussion of, we have had lots of discussions on transformer in the transformer vault exhaust in the past. Is it actually an explosion, an engineered explosion vent, or is it just a means for relieving smoke out of the vault if there happens to be a fire in there? So in generally, I would agree that I don't know, I guess, do we always want them 10 feet above any walking surface, or do we, I guess the walking surface language, we may want to use the same language that's in item 5 and say, above adjoining finished sidewalk, and not introduce some new terms. I guess that would be more of an editorial comment. Yeah, do we need language? A question would be, is it okay if we're, there are buildings that aren't zero lot line condition. I guess most of those don't have transformer vault exhaust, I guess, so maybe we don't need to worry about that. I guess I would remind folks that, you know, we do have a lot of naturally ventilated transformer rooms that don't have any exhaust, where the rooms are right on the building perimeter next to the sidewalk also going on. Yeah, so I guess we need to be kind of careful and intentional about if we're going to require 10 feet above. Seattle does have a requirement that's 10 feet above, so it is not uncommon. I think that the exact number of feet has been waffling around, but it's around 10 feet above in code cycles. And then one other editorial comment would be, yes, the state does adopt NFPA 70. There has been other code references in the building code that list it as NEC, and then in parentheses NFPA 70, and then the word section is typically used. So that might be an editorial addition to add an NFPA 70 in parentheses with the word section there, to be consistent with other code sections.
You know, the walking surface, I added that because I've had people put that sidewalk is arguable. I've had people put transformer exhaust in a residential patio on somebody's patio deck, and they said it wasn't a sidewalk, so they could put it there. So that some of that language gets a little bit arguable. So you can discuss on where you can put something, but so that's why I changed it to walking surface.
So do we want to use the same language in item 5? Is that?
Yeah, the sidewalk, it's like, is a road a sidewalk? I get that too. Is the road the sidewalk? It's like, the sidewalk is a little vague. Yeah, I think the sidewalk needs a little work. If you don't want it next to a pedestrian, a car or something. That's why I wrote walking surface.
In 501, there's general language, the public nuisance section that we all love. That says 501(3), the language used says that, you know, exhaust discharge cannot be directed onto walkways is the term. So if we wanted to be consistent with 501(3),
walkways. Okay.
so we could just use the word walkway.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I can rewrite this one. Are we rewriting it now?
Can it just be walkways in item 6, or does that have to be surface?
No, it could be walkways. That makes more sense anyway.
And should the word any be there, or is it just above walkways?
Yeah, just remove that one.
So one other potential editorial, I was just looking at where else in the mechanical code it references NFPA 70, and just the last sentence. I don't know if typically we have things that just say refer to.
Referenced in the index. I mean, in
Yeah.
the references. Yeah, I thought of that too. There is no NEC in the references. We would have to add the reference.
Mm-hmm. There's another section in 513 where it's written, it's in addition to meeting the requirements of NFPA 70 section 454.5, just as an example, like we could put that at the beginning of item 6. I don't know that that is super clear, but I think it's kind of like FYI, go look at NFPA.
Yeah.
And just trying to, yeah, make it seamlessly in there. Yeah, it could, just as an option, in addition to meeting the requirements of NFPA 70, section 450.45, comma, for transformer vault exhaust system outlets, and then the rest. It's not super elegant, but what do you think about that?
So I just left both of them in there so you can kind of compare
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Eric, do you like that?
I don't know if you need the word "for" anymore. It would just be transformer exhaust system outlets.
Yeah, we use for and
Oh, on
enclosed
all the other
parking
ones.
garage, yeah.
Yeah, scroll up to the beginning of this section. I don't know. How is
We've got
it?
4 in all of them.
Yeah, so there's supposed to be a continuation of that. They're all written as a continuation of that
Yeah.
first statement. So maybe it's better to have it at the end.
Yeah, it could also go after, so it could also go for transformer vault exhaust system outlets, comma, in addition to the requirements of NFPA 70, colon.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe that's better, so it has the consistency of starting in the same way.
Yeah, it looks better that way.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions for Valerie on this one, from anyone else? All right. If not, I guess we are looking for a motion to recommend or not recommend this move forward. Any takers? Anyone want to make a motion to move this one forward? Just as a reminder, kind of what we talked about at the beginning, by recommending it moves forward, it'll move forward to the MVE and then the council, and then it will go out for public comment.
I'll make a motion that it moves forward.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second?
Jeff will second.
Thank you, Jeff. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Please say nay. All right, motion passes, and this one will go into the recommended pile. So I think that moves us forward on to 2 proposals, one from Austin, which Eric, I assume you'll speak to, and one from Mike Fowler, both pertaining to section the new section 6055 about smoke filtration. So Eric, you want to talk about Austin's first?
Yes, this language is coming from the 2018 Seattle Mechanical Code, which requires air handlers and ERVs serving occupiable spaces to have the capability, and that are larger than 500 CFM, to have the capability of installing a MERV 13 filter. It does include an exception for recirculating air handlers that are not bringing in outdoor air, do not have to have this capability. They would just have to comply with the previous section if they have wetted coils for, I believe, the MERV 6 filtration, consistent with 62.1. So again, this allows higher level of filtration to address wildfires in the state, and folks being able to install a MERV 13 filter, but would not cover small ERVs or air handlers that are less than 500 CFM per our proposal. So minimal cost impact for these types of units, is this is just, having a filter rack that's capable of accommodating a MERV 13 filter. It would be up to the owner or user to decide if they want that level of filtration. And I think it's fairly similar to Mike Fowler's proposal, so we may want to review that one, I guess, before we vote. So
Yes.
Yeah, you're correct, Eric. Good morning. I'm Mike Fowler. I'm a sustainability integration leader at Methune in our Seattle office. Yes, the first, I'll say above the exception, it's identical to Austin's proposal. In chatting with Austin, we were trying to, originally I put mine in without the exception because, Krista, on the next page, this is more, while it's wildfire smoke, the Seattle language is in place before the current pandemic, and in October of 21, ASHRAE Epidemic Task Force released recommendations that recirculated air should be filtered with MERV 13 minimum. So that's why I originally had left out the exception in my proposal. And in chatting with Austin, he had some concerns about potentially apartments, residential units might not, if they were over 500 square CFM, might get caught up in the mix of this. That was not really originally intent, or some fan coil units might get caught up. So that's why I went back and revised it based on conversation with Austin, just to modify the exception. So that's what the difference is between it. They're identical, except the proposal I have in front of you is to make changes to the exception. Thank you, Krista.
I guess just as a further background, this language was developed by City of Seattle as directly in response to a request from the mayor's office to be able to require MERV 13, to require a higher level of filtration for, outdoor smoke. So yeah, if we're gonna extend it, I guess, to recirculating air handlers, then we, okay, so then there is some additional language there. Okay.
Why didn't you just revise 605.4 and add air handlers over 500 need a MERV 13 instead of adding another section? Because you could just change the state amendment.
Yeah, the reason it was done was the previous section requires a specific level of filtration. This section only requires a filter box that accommodates that. So it doesn't actually require you to install a MERV 13 filter. So I think if you there would be more cost impact if you have to install MERV 13 filters, and maybe a cost benefit analysis would then be required for the proposal. So
Yeah, that would increase your might increase the fan size because of the static friction on that. So this is just to provide capability. Okay.
yeah, theoretically, you should size the air handler to be able to accommodate a MERV 13 filter. So you could argue that it's just the filter cost itself, but and then the replacement cost of the filter. It also, this allows folks to only install a MERV 13 filter during the summertime when higher levels of outdoor smoke. I mean, that was the intent of Seattle's proposal, and to allow a different filter during the winter months when we don't have that. But yeah, a higher level of filtration on recirculating units would also, have side benefits for, indoor air quality and removal of viruses and other things. So.
Yeah, with whole house ventilation, you just open the window now. There's no filtration. So we are filtering some, but not everything.
We had a discussion on ASHRAE 62.2 about this issue of requiring MERV 13 versus MERV 11. I believe the preliminary was a very tight vote. Everything went down to one vote between 13 and 11. But I think we're moving in the 13 area in the future. And I do think you're right. There's two different issues. There's fire and there's epidemiology, and protecting people from the people in their apartments as well as other apartments. I just want to mention that as you go to higher MERV filters, the importance of having a clear commissioning plan and a maintenance and operation plan become even more important in terms of the frequency of changing those and educating, if it is the occupant that's responsible for that, the value proposition of doing that. Thanks.
Thanks all. One comment I have is I wonder if the section is potentially filtration capability, if that helps clarify that, first of all, it's not just about smoke, it's about, as Mike and Mike were just talking about, potentially other air quality issues, and then just clarifying that it's really about having the capability to go to higher filtration, but not required to actually have that filter. Curious how folks feel about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't really agree with calling it smoke filtration, because you're actually alluding to the fact that you're going to be filtering smoke. The codes speak of smoke removal and things like that, but that's kind of adding something that you are just removing particles. You're not just removing smoke, and maybe it won't remove the smoke. But yeah, the capability of providing a larger filter, because of course anybody could take a filter out and put any kind of size. Well, they can put a smaller one in, of course.
Eric, what's up?
Yeah, I have no problems with changing the section title. In regards to Mike Fowler's exception 1 there, the mechanical code also already prohibits recirculating air from one dwelling or sleeping unit to another dwelling or sleeping unit. So that exception implies that you're allowed to recirculate from, I'm assuming that's what living unit is intended to refer to. So I think that's already prohibited by Chapter 6 in general. I have to go look at the exact section. So was that the intent, Mike, to refer to residential dwelling and sleeping units for that exception?
The intent in conversation with Austin was concern of, say, a motel unit with a PTAC, and that could go into recycling. It'd be difficult for that to be manufactured with a MERV 13. It was trying to address, and so I agree with exactly what you said, Eric, but this was an attempt, and I'm open to rewording anything about the exceptions. It hasn't been through enough wordsmithing, but say like an apart or a hotel unit that had a PTAC unit. It was serving that one space, and it wasn't serving multiple occupants in like more of a conference room or something like that. That's what I was trying to go for. Yeah, Austin's concern was that there might be, say a PTAC might get, excuse me, caught up in this exception, and not be able to meet that criteria. And
So, yeah,
that I wasn't trying to go to that level, but more just the large recycling systems that recycle large areas in office spaces or auditoriums or conference rooms. You know, the spread of recirculated air.
So section 601.5, item 5 says return air. What does it say here? Shall comply with the return air taken from one dwelling unit shall not be discharged into another dwelling unit. So it apparently is clear for dwelling units. I guess that's not technically in the code for sleeping units, which would be hotels, dorms, student housing, dorms, other things like that. Anyways.
I'm not able to speak to if a PTAC unit has capacity greater than 500 CFM or not. That's, yeah, I'll rely on your expertise.
Yeah, there's PTACs
Yes.
that go into like equipment rooms, things like that. There are larger, but that would not an occupied space.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like an unducted VRF fan coil, you can only buy with MERV4 filtration, right? That's why we had a specific exception for that in the previous section of the code. Those kind of unducted VRF or mini split fan coils could be above 500 CFM for sure.
Yeah, and I believe that's what I believe we just had 2 quick conversations with Austin to try to reconcile some sort of a modification to the exception. But that's why I made an attempt, and defer to some expertise on this your specific mechanical knowledge to change the wording in any way that's more beneficial. But yeah, that's what he mentioned was the smaller, but something that might be above 500 CFM, PTACs or some type of fan coil units is what he specifically mentioned.
Mike, could you speak a little bit about exception 2 and what kind of the thought or logic was there?
That one I feel is, to me, it restates what the original 6055 says, but it was just trying to provide some clarity. Because the exception says that if it's 100% recycled, no outdoor air. It was more trying to say that you could still do a recirculated air system, but before you put it back into a space, filter it. It's the attempt. That's the meaning, the intent behind that second exception. Yeah, there could be design reasons that you want to do a recirculated system. I don't want to exclude that from the design possibility, but if you do go that route, then provide a way to filter it before it's delivered back into a space.
Should item 1 just be 2 separate items between the dwelling or sleeping unit and the space that does not? I don't even know how you enforce a space that does not serve multiple occupants. I
didn't know how to word conference rooms or large gathering spaces or communal office space. I guess it could be spelled out. That was my
almost
intent.
any space can be utilized by more than one occupant.
Right. But not, it's hard to define. I agree.
I'm wondering if that issue is also solved by just having a larger CFM threshold for that topic. It would be difficult to pin down what that number would be, but that could be another approach. All right, well, it sounds like maybe the exceptions here aren't quite yet hitting the nail on the head.
I guess it would be helpful to have feedback if we want this to just be for outdoor air, smoke filtration, or if we want it to extend beyond ASHRAE 62.1 minimum requirements of MERV 6 filtration, for virus and other types of controls in the code. So
Yeah, that's a great point, Eric.
I mean, folks can always go beyond code minimum.
Yeah, maybe anybody have thoughts or comments they want to share in support of having this expand beyond smoke filtration, or for here and now have limiting it to smoke filtration? I think that's kind of we should decide that first. And then if we do want it to extend beyond smoke filtration capabilities, then we kind of need to work a bit harder on the exception.
I kind of think we should keep it with the smoke filtration and not recirculated air. We would have to put a little bit more thought in the recirculated air part. There's a lot of things that come into the building that aren't filtered. So like makeup air for kitchen hoods, things like that. There's no filters required if they're not providing any cooling capacity. So there's a little bit more to think about, I believe, on that.
Sorry. Brandon, something to add there? No.
I guess one point would be, yes, I think that if we're starting to extend this to all filtration for all recirculating systems, there probably is a more in-depth cost benefit analysis that would be required for that, because I would see definitely impact on small business and other folks. More extensive review of products. As Valerie mentioned, there's things like there's electric cabinet heaters, for example, that have fans in them that may move more than 500 CFM that have no filtration in it and are recirculating. So there's definitely a much more extensive list of products out there we would probably have to review and see and develop exceptions for.
Thanks, Eric. Any other thoughts or opinions on that? Okay, let's just take a quick, Krista, are we allowed to take votes on things like straw poll votes on option A versus B?
Sure.
Okay. So let's see, all those in favor of limiting this to only smoke filtration, say aye.
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 Okay. All those in favor of having this address smoke filtration and recirculating air units, say aye. All right. Great. So I think with that feedback, then we should limit this to just the smoke filtration piece. So Krista, I think that puts us back more with the root language from Austin's proposal. Okay, great. So this is now then the proposal in front of us. So I think this gets it back then to what is presently in the Seattle Mechanical Code with the one edit there to the title. Does anyone else have any wordsmithing edits or comments or thoughts about this?
This is Brandon. Sorry, my microphone was a little bit weird there for a minute, but so my question, I guess, is you put a MERV 13 filter on a unit that moves 600 CFM. That unit now is going to probably move 300 CFM unless there's other language in this that says, you know, that the fan needs to be able to still accomplish its initial intent of, you know, 600 CFM, whatever that ends up being. So you start to starve that system of air as soon as you put that filter in there. You know, there's 12 different types of MERV 13 filters. Some have a lot lower pressure drop. So I'm concerned about that, and how does this language affect the overall ventilation going into that space? It would starve it fairly heavily during these times, which may be okay, but again, you're not going to filter out all the smoke. You're going to put a lot less ventilation into the space. That would be my concern with this.
Thanks, Brandon. Eric?
Yeah, I guess this is a minimum thing that a code official has to be able to check on a plan review, right? So they can check that there is a box that says, you know, that the filter rack can accommodate a MERV 13 filter. That's really what they're looking for. It's hard to create enforceable code to force folks to do the right thing, I guess, and design a system that's actually capable of that. And I don't know how we, you know, write enforceable code that would do that simply. So, you know, this doesn't require you to account for filter loading. It doesn't tell you when to change a filter. It doesn't tell you any of those things. So it just says you have to have a filter rack that can accommodate a MERV 13 filter. We can maybe add capable of a MERV 13 and achieve the design airflow. Maybe you could add some language like that maybe to it, I guess. But yeah, as far as which type of filter is installed and what the pressure drop of that is, I think we need to kind of steer clear of some of that language.
Thanks, Eric. Nancy?
Hi, sorry, I just joined. I had to take care of a medical issue. And can I catch up? Are you on this proposal to section 605.5?
That's correct. Yeah, we were comparing those two proposals on the same section. That's where we're at in the agenda.
That's two. Okay. And hi, Eric. Long time no see. This would be with new systems, right? This requirement, this would not be, or remodel, but basically new systems.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's saying that, and I haven't looked at all of these, that it needs to be able to accommodate a MERV 13.
Yes, this is the requirement that it will have the capability to do that. I think as it's written here with the intent that you might choose to go install that additional filtration in a smoke event.
Well, it wouldn't just be for smoke. We've been asking for MERV 13 for COVID also, or if there's significant ambient air pollution. So, I mean, all the guidance around smoke and respiratory infection has been to upgrade to MERV 13 if you can. So is there a problem sorry, I know it's bad when you come in the middle of a discussion. Is there a reason why this, California is actually requiring MERV 13 filters? Is the reason this can't be done?
Well, as was mentioned earlier, this is a minimum step that is requiring a filter rack. For MERV 13, there was no cost benefit analysis provided with either of these proposals. We just had a discussion that if we were to likely, we reviewed the language briefly on requiring it on the recirculating systems also, and we discovered there's probably a bunch of additional exceptions we would need for products that normally don't have filters, like electric cabinet heaters and other things that have fans. So the tag just voted to, or did a straw poll to focus on, yeah, outdoor air filtration for the smoke filtration capability. And we are kind of debating now on if we need to add some language to add, fan capacity to handle that pressure drop, which could be something that we send back to Rushing or Mike Fowler to develop that language for the next meeting.
Yeah, it's because as I understand it, it isn't just the size of the filter. They're not necessarily even a different size. It's the capacity to move the air through it. Although we do often encourage people to do 2-inch or greater because it reduces the air resistance.
My understanding that the real issue on fan capacity goes up when you get to the HEPA. The difference between 11 and 13 is, and that should be looked at, go out for discussion, but I support what Nancy's saying. I think it makes sense from a health standpoint to just move to 13. As I noted before, ASHRAE 62.2 was very close on the vote, and there's a lot of people focused on wanting to move to 16, both for particulates, which could be wildfire, as well as epidemiology, as that task force at ASHRAE document that was shown here noted. I have to get off the phone here. I have another commitment. I think we have a quorum without me, but I believe Jonathan Jones is my alternate and ready to take over for me. And I wanted to thank everybody for engaging me on this committee as I move on in the future. Well, thanks.
Bye, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Hey, see you, Nancy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I would like, I'm sorry I had to miss the first hour. I would like to do anything to move people to being able to accommodate MERV 13 filters. And in terms of the air resistance, Mike's right. I mean, there's a lot of research coming out of Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and UC Davis that hasn't shown that most systems can handle a MERV 13.
I would have to argue that small ERVs might not be able to do that in multifamily. They have the capacity for an 8, but I don't know if they have the capacity for a 13.
And I don't have much familiarity with those, although I do know they have real serious air quality issues, but I don't know their systems.
Well, and yeah, so yeah, there are ERVs that have small ERVs that have options for MERV 13. It varies by manufacturer, but again, and just so you know where the 500 CFM came out of the 2018 Seattle Code, that was a random number that came and was presented in a meeting to establish some kind of minimum system size, thinking that the small systems, it may be more of a hardship, small ERVs and such, but there are products out there that can do it, but they are not as many of them as the MERV 8 requirement we have in that section of the code.
Don't you think that's changing, Eric? I mean, we spent 2 years, well, prior to COVID, we spent a number of years with wildfire smoke issues encouraging MERV 13. That's been in EPA's guidance for quite some time now. And California has already changed their codes. And now with COVID, the internal air, we've been trying to get MERV 13.
So again, it totally varies by the type of fan coil. So when you look at a lot of the small products that are used in residences, mini split fan coils. If they have the wall console types, you can't get anything beyond a MERV 4 filter. They're set up with really low static fans. You could upgrade to ceiling cassettes, and you can maybe get MERV 6, or some manufacturers MERV 8. And then you have to get kind of into the fully ducted recirculating systems where you get a wider range, that are in the MERV 11 or MERV 13 range for those types of fan coils, without adding, if it's a ducted fan coil, there are options for different types of filter boxes, angled filter boxes versus straight filter boxes, where we can keep the pressure drop down for a lot of those products. But there's a huge range in different products in small fan coils and what filtration is available.
This is for the future. And again, don't you think that situation is going to change as the codes change?
Yeah, I mean, if there were codes that required a certain amount of filtration on recirculating.
Well, I believe that it's been a while since I looked at it, but California is requiring it everywhere.
I think
For
California is
13.
still on outdoor air intakes, but I haven't seen it
Could
everywhere.
be, I haven't looked at it in a while.
I know a lot of jurisdictions in California require the MERV 13 on outdoor air intakes.
It's residential and commercial.
Correct.
Okay. I think, one of the challenges in front of us is, at least the proposal we're looking at right now, is limited to the topic that is shown, and the provided cost data is really about the space for the additional filtration. And so expanding this particular proposal beyond the current scope. Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, one option would be to have this proposal, and then we could also, if there was desire by the tag, Mike, to work to revamp your exceptions to partially address part of what Nancy's talking about. But it almost feels like some of what you're bringing up, Nancy, would be a new proposal that would require some new research and new cost data that wasn't submitted as a proposal at this time or during the submission window. So,
Well, I don't know the people who made the proposals, so.
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, Mike's proposal does have some cost benefit in it, which would address. So we could go through that in more detail.
It's just an example of what is the cost difference between a MERV 8 and a MERV 13. It's fundamental, like off the web. It's nothing in depth. It's just to say that you're going to pay a little bit more for a MERV 13 than you would for a MERV 8. That's essentially it. Yes, it costs more, but it's better. It's recommended by ASHRAE.
Well, I guess, Mike, would you want to take the lead on revisiting some of your language, I guess, to address some of the issues that were raised with it about different system types, or potentially work with?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, I mean, Krista contacted me, and just when the agenda started going out, to say, hey, you and Austin have a similar proposal. Can you talk? Either, should I remove mine? I'm like, but we're addressing two different things. One is, I completely agree with MERV 13 for smoke and not just smoke season, but all year. But I also think that because of ASHRAE's task force, the recommendation for recirculating air to be filtered to MERV 13 as well. That's why I wanted to keep both and have this discussion with this tag. So yes, I'm happy to explore the language. So it's only been since last week, Thursday, that Austin and I started to have a conversation about it. So yes, I don't think, though the exceptions I propose are not 100% there, but I mean, I'm hopefully that you feel that it's more than 50%, at least it's on the right direction, and then it could be modified. And yes, I'm happy to bring in more people that be part of that discussion, as you said earlier, potentially homework.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's take that approach potentially, and we could vote today on the smoke filtration capability language, and then we could modify that in a future tag meeting if your homework and whoever you decide to pull into it is able to modify the exception to address the recirculation error. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
And I'm thrilled to see it. Thank you.
So if we wanted to try to address the fan capacity, I think I came up with a couple of words we could add to what we have on the screen right now. It could say 500, greater than 500 CFM shall provide fan capacity and a filter box. Something like that, that's very high level, to at least address it somewhat.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if they don't size it for the 13, they're not going to get enough outside air into the space. So it needs to be sized for the 13.
Yeah, I think that definitely works. Any final thoughts or comments on the language in front of us here? Okay. If not, then yeah, looking for a motion to recommend this forward. This one here.
I recommend moving this forward.
Thanks, Valerie. Is there a second?
Jeff will second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay.
And this would then also have the economic impact associated with it. Is somebody going to be investigating that additional impact along with working on the exception language that may come back later?
And so Krista, can you just scroll down a little bit on this one? So it has economic impact of the larger filter rack, right? Or filter box, but maybe, are you implying it doesn't necessarily have the additional fan capacity cost data in there yet?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, great point. Eric, is that something that Austin could potentially add?
Yeah, we can work to add something for that.
Okay.
Like we said, providing a 1-inch filter rack versus the 2-inch filter rack. Anyways, yeah, there's a million combinations, but we can add something for that. And then, yeah, Mike, reach out to Austin, myself, we can help develop some exceptions to make it more clear on the other proposal that we're tabling. So.
Thank
Okay,
you,
yeah.
Eric.
And then could we get a motion to table the other proposal so that we can revisit it in a future meeting?
Also move.
Thanks, Nancy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Valerie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. Awesome discussion. Thank you all so much. We'll revisit Mike's proposal probably, well, hopefully next week, or Mike, reach out if you need more time. It could be the second Thursday from now or May 26th.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. And then Eric, you said contact you in Austin, but do you want to open this up to any other mechanical engineers within the region as well? Or I don't know, how do you feel? I mean, I'm happy to do that.
Anybody
Reach
that
out.
wants to volunteer on it, that would be fine.
Okay, yeah, just to get some more input. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, is there anyone else here on the tag who wants to volunteer to provide some input on that tonight? Who's interested in that?
I might be able to be of some help. Mostly I know what I need, not how to accomplish it.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Nate.
Mike, I can help on the
Just for
equipment
smoke.
side. If you need some, selections or whatnot, I can help out, with some guidance of what those pieces of equipment would look like, and, with and without MERV 13 filters.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. So I
Yep.
got Brandon, Nancy. Okay,
Great, thanks, Mike.
all right, thank you.
Okay, that moves us along on the agenda to proposal 75. And this is about fire barriers and fire partitions. So I think, Eric, you get to share this one as well.
Okay. So this is a proposal to try to clarify what's commonly known as kind of the pass-through rule for using ducts of a certain gauge to pass through. I guess in this case, what do we got? Fire barriers and fire partitions. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to put together some diagrams to kind of explain this, but what I've always found hard to imagine about this is, they reference that you can't have flex connections. Essentially, they want it hard ducted the whole way, and and at some point, and all the way out to the air terminal. So technically, if you read the letter of this language, no matter how far you are from that rated wall, you have to maintain that hard duct. So for example, I could come, 6 inches past that duct or past that rated wall and have a direct opening with a sidewall supply grill or something, but I can't run 100 feet past that and then have a piece of flexible duct out to my diffuser. So I was trying to create some clarification that, as long as you don't have a flex connection or a flexible duct within the area that you're trying to pass through, that you're able to provide those flex connection as required by the code for seismic and whatnot at the appliance. And as long as you can have flex duct at a certain distance from the rated wall that's penetrated. So that's what I'm trying to clarify in the code here. I know various jurisdictions treat this differently throughout the state, but yes, trying to provide some means to use this exception to limit the amount of fire dampers that we have, and have some sensible way of enforcing the code.
Eric, one kind of question on this. As I'm looking at the 2021, it does seem like there's some changes to that item 3.
Oh, maybe I grabbed the wrong one. Okay.
May
Oh,
partly address some of this, maybe not all
okay.
that we're speaking to, but we might just need to take a look at that and then see how much of this needs to be integrated. Nancy, I see your hands up.
Yeah, just a kind of a confused question. What does the fire department say, or the fire marshal? Don't we have to coordinate with the fire codes?
Yeah, this isn't in the fire code. It is also in the building code though. So it's there's building code actually has a section for this as well for fire barriers and fire partitions. But no, it's not fire, it's mechanical. Even though it's a fire damper.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, this same language is in the building code, so it could get referred to the building code committee if we get it through this tag, I guess, the building code tag.
Yes, a confusing section with the continuous hard duct I do agree with adding the fire resistant rated seismic vibration isolators and connectors. I do agree with that. That would be the equivalent of a hard duct. I don't know about the 10 feet though. That one, it has been used so many different ways, I know, by construction. And is this a copy from Seattle?
No,
Eric? No? Okay.
okay, yeah, I see that I did grab this from the 2018, I guess, and I forgot to grab it from the 2021. So that's where I went wrong there. Yeah, maybe I just need to table this one until I can look at it further. So.
Okay, yeah, I think that might make sense just because there is like a fair bit of new language there that again, maybe I was looking back at our significant changes report and we did adopt this change. So if this adequately addresses your concern, then maybe this one can be withdrawn, but definitely take the time to figure out how you want to proceed.
Yeah, so it looks like they modified just the fire barriers one and not the fire partitions one. So in the 2021. I don't know, Valerie, would you be willing to meet with me on this one offline and come up with something?
Sure, definitely. This one's always given me a problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or issues anyone wants to bring up for Eric and Valerie to consider before we table this one? All right. Looking for a motion to table.
I make a motion to table.
Thanks, Valerie.
Second.
Thanks, Nancy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. We will return to this one. All right, so I think next up is proposal 74, which pertains to IMC section 915, engine and gas turbine. So Eric, take it away.
Yeah, so this is an attempt to reference some NFPA sections, which are referenced briefly in the building code, mostly for emergency and optional standby power generation systems. One of the challenges here is, NFPA standard 110 is written in NFPA language and is not written in building code language. So there is much confusion when you read NFPA 10 for some of these items and how they should be enforced. So again, this is mostly pointers to those code and then some clarifications on how we treat, generator air intakes. So there's air intakes for both the combustion air that's coming into that and the radiator cooling air, and then discharges for the combustion air and which section that falls into, and then the radiator cooling outlet air. So it's my opinion that the radiator cooling outlet air is not really governed at all by Chapter 5 exhaust, because it is not exhaust. It's just outlet air coming off of that radiator. So it's not environmental air. It's none of those. So this provides direct, references. So again, emergency and legally required power systems have to fully comply with the requirements in NFPA 110. So item 915.3.1 describes that air has to come from, outside the building. It can't come from a parking garage and whatnot. And then I provide that it has to be at least 5 feet from the property line to be just to provide some direction as to how far from the property line it should be. Totally flexible on that distance and how we want to clarify that. So then it looks like I misnumbered the next section. It should be 915.3.2, air outlets, and sorry, 915.3 point, that one there, air outlets. So I just am providing that reference that combustion exhaust would be considered product conveying and need to comply with section 501.3.1 item 2 for the product conveying exhaust. So just provide some clarity as to how we treat the combustion outlet on the generator. And that the radiator outlet, again, needs to go back to the exterior of the building per NFPA 110. Can't discharge within the parking garage for an emergency generator, and has to discharge at least 5 feet from a property line. And I guess I threw in 2 feet above grade there. So that's for our emergency and legally required emergency power systems. Generators. Then in another section 915.4 that addresses optional standby power systems. So these are generators that aren't serving life safety loads, that are serving servers or other optional standby powers, walk-in coolers, walk-in freezers within, and so these do not have to fully comply with all the provisions in NFPA 110 and have more flexibility. So we can take air from within an open or enclosed parking garage. Again, our combustion air is clarified that has to go to the outside of the building and meet the product conveying exhaust requirements, and that the radiator outlet may relieve back into the open or enclosed parking garage as long as we have sufficient openings or other means to relieve that heat from the generator system. So gives us something to point at for generator installations, and provides pointers to those code sections.
Eric, I got a question. Why have you got NFP 110 with your optional power system? That's just NFPA 37.
Okay.
So IMC directs you to NFPA 37 for generators, and then 37 directs you to 110 for emergency generators. So you don't want 110 with that optional standby power.
Yeah, good catch. Okay.
Okay.
So that would change to 37.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like all the rest. It's good. It's how I would call it. The 5 feet, you got minimum of 5 feet from property line. That's fine. You don't go into if it's on a public way or something like that, but that's probably not necessary.
Correct. Again, it's relieving, the radiator outlet is relieving hot air off the generator. It's only running, during a power outage scenario. So I did not try to further restrict that. And I'm, also not addressing, that the fact that oftentimes, at least for the optional, these are taking air from the parking garage and exhausting it maybe out. That is acting as garage exhaust while the generator is running, but I'm silent on that fact that it's okay to to discharge this at a sidewalk because it's just a temporary condition. It's not a normal permanent thing that's happening.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the generator would just be running during emergency situations or testing.
Yeah, or yeah, once a week or once a month, whatever the testing happens to be.
Nancy, go ahead.
Okay, I feel like haven't really read the codes enough. I did not know some of these provisions were in the code. My issue, and maybe you can clarify it, we deal with carbon monoxide poisoning from generators. And all the research in NIST, National Institutes of Standards and Testing, I think, have done a lot of modeling. You need to be 25 feet away from openings if you're exhausting from a generator because of carbon monoxide. I hadn't realized or thought about these. These are for permanent installations of generators.
Correct. So commonly yes, I've always, most all code officials that I've dealt with have called it product conveying exhaust, which is handled the combustion outlet, which is handled, which is covered by 501.3.1 item 2. So that would provide the specific distances for that outlet. And I can find that code section here and read that to you. But that's generally, that does not recommend a 25-foot separation in the code. Product conveying exhaust is 10 feet from property lines, 3 feet from the exterior walls or roof, which means that tailpipe has to extend past the face of a wall or above a roof by 3 feet. You know, oftentimes this is 1200-degree exhaust coming out of the tailpipe. And so, you know, there's obviously needs to have some distance to combustibles and other things. 10 feet from operable openings into the building and 10 feet above adjoining grade is what the code, what that item says. So that's, you know, in the 3 categories of exhaust, 1, 2, and 3 that are in that section, it's the medium category, right? The environmental air is less restrictive than that, and ducts conveying explosive or flammable vapors is more stringent than that. So that's how it's outlined in the mechanical code.
Well, and by property line, this applies for residential areas too, where you only have 5 feet from people's houses.
This is the mechanical code, so it's not IRC language. So most single family homes would be covered under the IRC, which have the mechanical provisions in them.
I'm seeing a real disconnect. Sorry, I hadn't realized this existed because the research on the 25 feet has been there for quite a few years now. We have a serious problem with carbon monoxide entrainment from generators. And it's only growing because of the increased use of generators. So what would your proposal change from what's existing? Would it shorten this to 5 feet from a 10 feet?
No, my proposal only provides pointers to the current code and how it's being enforced by most jurisdictions. So it just gives us a clear point of reference that this is product conveying exhaust, that it's not explosive or flammable vapor exhaust, fumes, or dust. You know, with all large generator systems, I would recommend a wind study for where that exhaust is going to end up if you're in a place where it can be re-entrained into the building. But those things are not codified at this point as to where that air is going to go when it comes out of the tailpipe. So this is kind of maintaining status quo.
Thanks, Eric. Jonathan.
So I got to mute. I just wanted to point out that we do quite often refer back to the IMC in the residential mechanical ventilation and such. So this will pop up from time to time in the residential too. We do backflow quite often referencing this sections the opposite direction too, just as a heads up. You said it wouldn't affect the residential because it has its own in the IRC, but there's quite often we have the IRC, the IEC, and the IMC all will make us jump back and forth between all of them. Just wanted to throw that little heads up out there.
You're not going to see an emergency generator installed underneath 110 in a house, a single family house. You will see emergency generators for healthcare providers who have licenses, and you will find them in high rises to support the smoke control systems in a high rise. But you're not going to find an emergency generator at somebody's house. This only covers those types of situations.
We're starting to see them because of the removal of gas in the single family energy codes. The concern on the Eastern Washington is being left without power. So people are putting in emergency generators now because of the code's carbon footprint in the 406.2 chart. I think NIA study showed something like an 80% shift to heat pump, and then they backtracked a little to more like 60 or 50% with more data that was trickling in. So you're seeing a massive shift in the residential industry away from the gas appliances, but you have this large concern for safety during these really severe cold months we get on our sides of the mountain. So we are starting to see some generators being installed in residential properties over here.
Yeah, but they're not considered a legally required generator. A legally required generator is something somebody has to install to support their smoke control system for evacuation of a building. So the term legally required is another thing. The electrical code calls them something else. They call them level 1, level 2 generators. So that's even more confusing. But
your language here says installation of emergency and legally required.
But that would be, if it's in a house, that's going to be an optional standby power generator system.
So you're not going to classify that as emergency?
No.
And if that's the case, you might want to have that language in there, because as the code support guy, which is why I brought this up, I guarantee you we're going to get a ton of technical questions about that language right there. So if you could clarify that.
Yeah, that language is straight out of NFPA 70. So that's the language that's used in NFPA 70. So
Okay.
3 classifications, correct.
I agree. We are seeing more and more generators put in for homes. We have very short distances between property lines. I can see where if it's a commercial installation, they might, I hope, require some modeling to prevent entrainment. But 5 feet is not sufficient. It's a problem. This is a huge problem. It's been argued at the
Well, the combustion exhaust would be 10 feet, right? Not 5 feet. We haven't said anything about combustion exhaust being less than 10 feet.
There's 2 different air streams coming out of that generator. One's off the tailpipe, just like a car, and that is the one that's the combustion exhaust. The radiator is just cooling air coming across the radiator. So there's 2 different air streams coming through there.
I can't read what Carolyn has up, but I've got the other one open on my other screen in big print. And I'm not seeing where it actually, minimum of 5 feet from the property line. That's
an intake.
The intake.
So it's covered in 50131 item 2 is where.
And you were reading that. I don't have that available at the moment.
So it's 10 feet from property lines, 3 feet from an exterior wall or roof, 10 feet from operable openings into a building, and 10 feet above adjoining grade.
Well, I began to see where part of the problem is, because I've not heard this discussion about the codes with the CPSC work, which started, well, almost, 8 years ago now, but then was put on hold for 4 years. But I don't see how I'm going to address this issue in here. But I do think we will be seeing a lot more residential use of generators.
That should be a change to the IRC then. This is all in the NFPA. He's just pulled it out of the NFPA so it's easier to read and directs you to the right. Well, directs you to some locations for outlets and intakes of the exhaust and ventilation, which is the code, but it's kind of hard to read NFPA 110. It's a hard read. I've read it 100 times.
So Val, you're right. Oh, go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering if there was just a quick homework item on looking at the mechanical chapters of the IRC to verify or answer the question of whether or not it's actually referring to this section. Because if it's not, then at least we can decouple those issues and have that be kind of answered. And then I think, yeah, just reiterating that these are not new requirements or new distances or new whatnot. I think it's pulling data and information that's hidden in, as Valerie was just saying, these standards that are a lot to slog through. And so trying to put it front and center in the mechanical code where designers will have better access to the information. So
I don't think the IRC addresses generators. The fuel gas code addresses some, but there's not much in the IRC or the fuel gas. A generator for a home is more than likely going to be propane or natural gas. A generator in a high-rise building is going to be diesel. So there's two different engines that are going on. So for residential, you should look at the fuel gas section of the code to dictate distances for that generator.
Yeah, I'm just beginning to see that a lot of these issues have not been addressed where they probably need to be addressed, because like I said, the NIST studies go back at least 10 years. CPSC has wrestled with trying to reduce the carbon monoxide in generators, and they got forestalled for 4 years and they've come back. But part of the issue is going to be where they're being stalled. I had already heard what Jonathan said, that in Eastern Washington, there's going to be a lot more generators. I think there's going to be a lot more generators everywhere. I live in a Kirkland suburb with deteriorating electricity, and we keep having mechanical or equipment failures, and everybody's working from home. And generators aren't very expensive comparatively these days. So, but that's not, like you said, this is not the same issue. You've just brought up a whole new problem I need to see about wrapping my head around.
Yeah, agreed. This was not intended kind of specifically for single family homes, and that would probably be better addressed in the IRC. So.
great. Any other questions or comments for Eric on the language in front of us? Is there anyone who wants more time to review or consider this one, or before we take action on it? Okay, hearing no further comments, looking for a motion. Oh, I know one super minor thing, Krista. Are those NFPA standards currently in the references of the IMC, or would NFPA 110 and 111 just need to get added there?
Let me double check.
We can check that.
Let's see, 70 is
36.
reference, but not 110 or 111 or 37.
37's in there.
37's in there.
Seven's definitely,
Okay, so we would,
no, so I will add them.
okay,
So the way I always got there is just, I got there from NFPA 37, which directs you to NFPA 110. So that's how that's the path I always took.
okay, yeah, I think if they're just now going to be in the mechanical code, we can just add
Okay.
there, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I generally look for that when I'm going through and amending and make sure I have them all captured.
Great. So looking for a motion or action on this one.
I make a motion to pass this code change.
Thanks, Valerie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes. And let's see, that moves us on to proposal 78, vent piping. Take it away, Eric.
Okay. Trying to remember what this one was. Oh, this is the vent. Okay, this is vent piping for fuel gas systems. So there's a conflict between NFPA requirements for where fuel tank vents are required to terminate and between NFPA 30. So this is meant to add a definition of building opening so that we have a clear definition for what building openings are, and then make the mechanical code consistent with NFPA 30. To reference the 5 feet from building openings and not less than 15 feet from outdoor air intakes. So we have that consistency between NFPA and our code. And then I have an exception for the fuel vents may terminate outside the building, not less than 2 feet from the fuel oil equipment combustion exhaust outlet, so they can be located immediately adjacent within 2 feet of where the generator tailpipe exits the building, because they're coming off of the same piece of equipment. So this helps to clarify how close the generator tailpipe can be to the fuel vents, which are typically grouped together on the exterior of the building.
I got a couple comments. Did you add that definition of building opening to the building to IBC?
I haven't yet, no.
It's a direct, it directly
Oh.
contradicts type 1 exhaust terminations,
Okay,
which are fixed and operable opening, fixed windows.
right.
So a building opening is defined under, and it's not really defined, but it's in the IBC under building openings.
Right, yeah.
So I don't like your definition of building opening. It's a fixed window and any kind of opening in the structure of the building is a building opening. And then,
Yeah, I would agree, Valerie, that, yeah, the building code has building openings. And they talk about protected and unprotected building openings. And I guess the mechanical code uses building opening. That term, I guess, is also used. It's used in this instance, and it's also used in chapter 11 with refrigeration rooms. So that's currently the two locations in the mechanical code where building opening is referenced.
and then the fuel gas code, I mean, not the fuel gas code, the fire code has this section in it as well under 5704. And the fire code is 5 feet
All right.
from, and then, so the IMC is 2 feet, NFPA 37 is 2 feet. At least it was the last time I looked at it, might have changed. And then the fire code is 5 feet.
And NFPA 30 is 5 feet.
They're all different.
So yeah, there's 2 references to 5 feet and 2 references to 2 feet. Yes.
Yeah, it
Okay.
depends on which code you look at. Yeah, it would be nice if they matched. So did you say it's 37 has 5 feet? 37 has 2 feet.
No, you said 37. I didn't look at NFPA.
Okay.
37 has 2 feet. I missed looking at that one.
And then the fire code requires it 12 feet above grade. So these code sections have never matched. The IMC has never matched the fire code. So it depends on what code you look at.
So can you scroll down to the screen clip of NFPA 30? I think it's on the next page. There it is. Okay, so that 27.8.1.3 is where the 5 feet is coming from.
Correct.
And then in NFPA 37, 6.7.1.1, it says shall terminate outside of building not less than 2 feet from any building openings. In any case, the most stringent would apply.
Okay, so that seems, even if obviously we can't update NFPA 37, but we can create greater consistency with the fire code and NFPA 30 through this change.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so we could choose not to adopt the building definition. If we want to kind of stay silent on that, the building opening definition, which is used twice in the mechanical code, that's an option. And then there's an option, just list the 5 feet and reference NFPA 30 and NFPA. I don't even. Yeah, you could add the 15 feet. I think it's prudent to have the 15 feet, I guess, from outdoor air intakes. Again, that's using, and then, yeah, then we have to decide on the exception. So.
Thanks, Eric. Any other thoughts or comments on this one from anyone?
Excuse me, I have a comment. Does this refer to a normal vent pipe or emergency vent pipe or both?
Just, yeah, the code just refers to vent pipes. So it would apply to a normal or an emergency, is my understanding. I mean, oftentimes the emergencies on on UL 2085 tanks are within the generator room as allowed, but anyways. Depends on your fuel tank tape, I guess. So.
All right. Any other questions for Eric on this one? Does anyone want more time to review this one? All right, with that, I'm looking for some sort of motion or action on this one.
I'm just kind of that 15 feet from outdoor intakes. Somebody would not read this and read the ventilation section. It's not really linked to outside air intakes. I'm okay with it, but I'm afraid somebody might not know that existed if they were reading just the ventilation part of the code.
Well, what? Shouldn't they be reading the whole thing? Obviously, I like the further away exhaust is from intakes, the better. That's my whole mantra. But I'm not installing these things.
So yeah, again, the NFPA 30 language, it's where that's coming from, at least 15 feet from powered ventilation air intake devices. So I just changed that to outdoor air intakes, common language. You know, we could provide a pointer somewhere else in the code to this, but I don't know. Yeah. If you're trying to figure out where you're terminating your vent piping, you're going to go to this section, I guess, first. So.
Okay, I'm good with that. It's
Okay, I'll
mentioned.
move approval then.
I second it.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, next up, our final proposal for today, which I think we'll just power through here instead of taking a break. So this one is proposal 1 from Kevin Johnson regarding the fuel gas code and a gas valve standards table. I don't know, is Kevin here or anybody here to speak on Kevin's behalf? Krista, were you able to reach out to Kevin or did he respond with interest to consider presenting this or?
I sent him notification. I did not hear back.
Okay. And Krista, can you kind of remind me, or can we consider proposals from proponents who are not present, or is it better to try to wait until he's here to lead us through that?
It's kind of up to the chair. It depends on how much time we have left in the process and.
Okay. Well, we can go ahead and talk about it. You know, I guess as I looked at this one, again, this is now in the fuel gas code, and I think the essence of the proposal is the desire to add this 4th row to this gas valve standards table so that it could apply to slightly larger sized valves. So right now, the B1644 and B1633 are reference standards. So this would also then be adding B16.38 as a reference standard. So I think looking at his rationale there, only the B16.44 valves are approved for use in natural gas systems with pipe 2.5 inch to 4 inch. The proposed amendment adds the ASME standard for gas valves 2.5 up to 12 inches up to 125 PSI, allowing an option for larger gas valves in addition to ASME B1644. So I think that's kind of the root of his issue. I think my main question was if this is kind of a common or popular issue. Just is it a Washington state specific need, or is this something, seems like it would be something that would be encountered in all states and jurisdictions. Curious if anyone has any thoughts or comments on this one.
Is this for threaded valves? Is this just for threaded valves? Because the fuel gas could, above 4 inches pipe diameter, you have to have a welded system. You can't have threaded metal fittings after 4 inches, larger than 4 inches. Is this just for threaded? If it's just for threaded, then it doesn't need to be in here because they can't have threaded 4 inch. Above 4 inch. Let's see, ASAM is.
Yeah, my other question was just looking at B16.38. It was for natural gas distribution systems. And was just curious too if that would be an appropriate standard to have in the fuel gas code, which typically applies downstream of the point of service. And just if that was kind of an applicable standard to this use. So.
Yeah, we shouldn't have distribution in there.
Okay, well, I think I would probably suggest we table this one and see, Krista, if we could confirm if Kevin can attend next Thursday or the following Thursday to help answer some of the questions we have about his proposal. Anybody else have any comments or questions they want to bring up about it for everyone to think about in the meantime?
So if we add this, we'll have to also reference this under ASME in the references, because those other valves are referenced in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think looking for, oh, Nancy, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I really don't know anything about this. I'm just thinking if he's not here to defend it, do we table it? If none of you can see a need for this and see if he provides more rationale, or, I mean, I would just follow your lead on this, but I'm not hearing much that says yay or nay.
Agreed. I think probably the best move here would be to table this one and see what, if Kevin wants to show up and explain more of it. And if not, perhaps it gets either rejected or withdrawn. So with that, yeah, looking for a motion to table.
I'll move tabling.
Thanks, Nancy.
I second.
Thanks, Valerie. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Great. Well, we are through all of the proposals I think we were hoping to tackle today. Eric, what's up?
Yeah, I was just going to mention the residential ventilation proposal. I'm close to revising that to be more clear based on some other feedback I got from just after it was proposed. I know I mentioned that to you yesterday or last week. So hopefully tomorrow I'll have a updated draft that's got better language for that to you and to council staff. So
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, that's a great segue to next week. I think next week we will first tackle all the ones we haven't talked about, just so we can make sure to have a first round of discussion on all of those. Again, most of them pertain to something to do with ventilation. And then once we get through all of those, we will revisit the ones that we tabled from today. And then we'll have that third meeting to revisit anyone's tabled this week or just anything that needed any further discussion.
Do we have 2 more meetings scheduled?
Yeah, Nancy, I think, yeah, went over that at the beginning there. I know you were just a little bit late, but yeah, the thought is we have today's meeting. We will meet next Thursday, the 19th, and then we will also meet Thursday, the 26th. If we need more time than that, we can also extend into early June, but this Thursday morning slot is kind of the targeted time slot. So
Will we get invites soon so I can block the time out?
yeah, I think Krista should be sending those out pretty soon.
Thursday mornings are bare for me.
I think I may have gone ahead and put the 2 June meetings on the schedule on the website, just in case, and then I can go back and.
June? I thought we were talking May.
We are, but if we have to go into June, I went ahead and booked or put that notice down. And then we can just cancel those meetings if they are not necessary, but.
Okay, but
Sounds great.
you are
Krista,
sending out a new invite because I don't have an invite for anything past today.
Right, this is so far the only meeting that I had set up the Zoom conference for yet.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure I didn't lose something.
Great. So yeah, everybody keep an eye out for the meeting invite for next Thursday, the 19th, and following Thursday, the 26th. Yeah, before we adjourn, any general comments, questions, concerns about anything related to process, schedule, content? Okay, as always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any concerns about anything. And yeah, really appreciate everybody's time and patience getting through all of this and expertise. So with that, we are adjourned and see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.